Welcome everybody, I'm Scott Haley. I'm CSU's wheat breeder, and my job here today is to walk us through the varieties here at this irrigated plot here just a little bit south of Holyoke. Before we start in on the varieties here, I wanted to just point out a little bit about the Making Better Decisions book, which Jerry Johnson and his team have up on the web right now, so you can go to csucrops.com, or I also have it posted on the Wheat Breeding and Genetics Program website at wheat.colostate.edu. And I tend to use this at a field day situation to kind of point out a couple of things that we may talk about when we look at when we go down and look through the varieties. So I think as many of you are aware, the CSU Crops Testing Program under the leadership of Jerry Johnson has a dryland trial system with 11 dryland trial locations located throughout the state and 3 irrigated trial locations. And this is one of those 3 irrigated trials. The other 2 one is at Burlington, Colorado, and then the other is at Fort Collins, and my team manages that at the CSU RDEC Research Center. So one of the things, I guess just kind of thinking about this in a broader sense, one of the things you look at when you look at the dryland trials is a diversity of different kinds of locations, geography, production management situations, and all sorts of different kinds of things which allow us in breeding as well as variety testing to try to expose some of the faults that we might see in different varieties. And it's really no different, I would say, with regards to these irrigated trial locations. They're very different, they're geographically separated, but also from a production management perspective, they're all very different. The trial location that's near Burlington, as well as this Holyoke location, they're both in producers' fields, cooperating producers' fields, and so in that rotation, they're following corn. So they tend to be later planted than we have at Fort Collins. At Fort Collins, we tend to get in around the 10th to the 15th of September. And so for quite a number of years, Jerry Johnson and his team would kind of separate out the results by location, and I guess I would encourage producers to do that themselves. So with regards to the 2020 irrigated trials, as I indicated, there are 3 locations. There's 34 entries this year, and as I indicated, my job will be to go down and look at the public entries. We have them arranged in order of some red wheats and then white wheats for the most part, and then the company wheats will follow. And it's my understanding that the company representatives will be providing videos to talk about their varieties, and so I won't be doing that at all. Okay, so in that booklet also these are the trial results from this past year. On page 21, we have the trial results from Burlington, Fort Collins, and Haxton trial locations. The 2-year averages are on page 22, and the 3-year averages are on page 23. As you look at that 3-year average table, a couple of things I'd like to point out is that we had over the last 3 years 2, if not 3 different trial locations that were very heavily affected by wheat streak Mosaic virus, and so keep that in mind a little bit. So you look in the characteristics table, and as we look at the varieties, I'll keep some of that. I'll try to mention some of those things as we look at the different varieties. So with that, I guess I'd love to take questions, but Roger's the only one here. So we'll just maybe go ahead and look at the varieties, and there's not very many of them here, so it won't take us very much time. So the one on my right here is Denali, and actually I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I should have pointed out the characteristics table. Roger, you should have helped me there. It's all my fault. Characteristics table, which starts on page 26, and a couple of things I might point out about that is some of the things that I guess I look at as a breeder. What are the things that are important for us when we look at the characteristics that are key when we look at making that irrigated variety decision? Plant height, of course, is a key one, and we tend to see a general tendency of the taller wheats. It's a general tendency but the taller wheats tend to be a little bit lesser on the straw strength scale. The one right here on my right might be an exception. This is Denali, released from our program quite a number of years ago. It's already 9 years ago, hard to believe. But Denali is a little bit of a taller wheat, which does have good straw strength. But overall, we tend to see the taller wheats not stand up quite so well. So the other thing I would look at would be the straw strength, and that's SS in this column. And those are all based on visual scores when we get lodging at a yield trial or at a breeding nursery location. And it's a very simple visual score. We can score hundreds of plots in a pretty short period of time. But essentially, we score it from 1, where that plot, or that variety is completely erect, to 9, where that variety is completely flat. So looking back over all the years that I've been here, the numbers of times where I've been able to get a straw strength note in dryland trials is probably, I'd say way less than 5% of the trial locations in Colorado do we get an opportunity to see straw strength. So straw strength differences among the varieties. But oftentimes we do in irrigated trial locations. So the couple, 3 more columns down the line, we've got YR, LR, and SR. And those stand for yellow rust, which is known as stripe rust, and then leaf rust, and then stem rust. And so those are the 3 rust diseases that affect wheat here in Colorado. And we've ordered them that way in the table because that's the order of their appearance in Colorado. Stripe rust, none of these rust pathogens overwinter very often at all here in Colorado. We tend to, our infections when we get them are from spore showers that come up from the south and from the east. But stripe rust has a different temperature threshold than the leaf rust, and leaf rust has a higher temperature threshold than the stem rust. So over the years that I've been here, very, very seldom have I ever been able to get a stem rust note, and when I have, it's been in an irrigated trial location. So the reason I bring that up is that in a breeding context, as well as in a variety selection context for irrigated production conditions, rust resistance is very important. And oftentimes producers will use a fungicide, even prophylactically, where they don't know that they're going to get rust, but the fungicides are relatively, at least the generic ones, are relatively inexpensive. So producers will put on that fungicide application. Oftentimes, that fungicide application, though, is not effective later in the season, where we might tend to see stem rust. So of those characteristics, they're all important, right? But stripe rust can be the most devastating, and I think stem rust is one that we do need to keep an eye on, especially for irrigated conditions here in Colorado. As I indicated, the fungicide's gone, and it's really a deceiving disease too. It's hard to find, and but it can be especially devastating. And I'll point out a couple of things in that regard as we look at the varieties. So the next one that we see here is wheat streak mosaic virus, and I guess I wouldn't tend to associate wheat streak as being something that's very important under irrigated production conditions, except to the extent that some of these trials are located in areas where we've got pivots, where we've got corn on pivots, and the wheat curl mite does just fine in maize, and the corn dries down, the maize dries down in the fall, right? And those wheat curl mites hop onto the wheat. So of these last 3 years, that's where we've seen some of the worst damage to wheat streak mosaic virus, and I'll talk about that as we look at some of the varieties. And then the other things that we see there, test weights, probably not as big of an issue under irrigation. Protein concentration is very important, and then the milling and baking quality characteristics. So, with regards to milling and baking quality, we do have in the report there, starting on page 32, a very comprehensive milling and baking quality analyses done on the samples from this past year. Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and start in on some of the varieties. And as I indicated, Denali is the one here on my left. Brawl CL Plus is the one here on my left. Denali is on my right. And going back and looking, both of these varieties were released in 2011, and of all the I guess what I would say more dryland adapted wheats that we've developed over the years, these are 2 that have probably had a little bit better record under irrigation. largely because they have a little bit better straw strength characteristics. So we kind of, you know, leave them in here sort of as long-term checks. So the next one that we have here on my right is Canvas. And Canvas was released from our program at CSU in 2018. And this is marketed by, through the Plains Gold brand. So as we saw with the Denali and the Brawl CL Plus, we've got very good straw strength in Canvas. It's probably, aside from Monarch that we'll see down towards the end, one of the better straw strength varieties that we've released over the years. It's done well under dry land. It's done really well under irrigation. Again, stands real well. Good test weights. It has had good combined resistance to all three of the rust pathogens that I mentioned. Very good stem rust resistance that I talked about already. One thing I'd like to mention about the stripe rust resistance is that there is some indication that there may be a new variant or a new race. We call these, pathologists call these races, but a new race of the stripe rust pathogen that may be able to overcome some of the resistance that we have in some of these varieties. So anything I'm going to say about stripe rust is with regards to the old races. So Guardian has, Canvas has done very, very well. Good combined resistance to all three rusts. It carries the same gene for resistance to the wheat curl mite that Bird and Avery and some of the other wheats have, and we've seen that to be very effective where we have wheat streak mosaic virus. Good quality characteristics and a really solid choice for irrigated production conditions. On my left here is Guardian, and Guardian is a new release from our program, just released this past fall, again marketed by through the Plains Gold brand. And Guardian is not what I would call to be an irrigated adapted wheat, but if you look at those characteristics tables there, in particular the 3-year table, I guess it was on page 23 as I recall, Guardian is right up there in the number 2 spot. And I think that highlights what I was talking about earlier, that a couple of times over the last few years we've had really severe problems with wheat streak mosaic virus, and in a couple of the irrigated locations, and at those locations Guardian has floated to the top. So its straw strength is not quite as good as we see in something like a Canvas, and but the other characteristics that I would like to mention, again, that the wheat streak mosaic virus comes from a combination of 2 different mechanisms, one being resistance to the wheat curl mite that I talked about, but then it also has a gene for resistance to wheat streak mosaic virus itself. And that's the same gene that's been in Snowmass or Oakley CL or some of these other wheats. So Guardian, yield-wise in dryland trials has been maybe a little bit less than pretty similar to Avery, actually. So there's some other wheats that have been a little bit higher yielding, but extremely solid agronomic package, great quality, and has a real strong potential for making protein. Had a story in this booklet a few years ago about something called grain protein deviation, and Guardian is at the top of the pack on that. Okay, but if this trial gets up above 100, 110 bushels, we'll start to see the Guardian go down. Not quite as bad as we'd see like in an Antero or Bird, but it will go down. So the next wheat that we have here on my right is an experimental line from our program, Colorado 15D098R, and this is not an irrigated adapted wheat. We put it in here just to get, you know, a really good reading to see how the straw strength holds up. What we've seen in the past is it's not that great. Okay, so but this one, turn off the ringer on my phone. So this one is on increase, potentially targeted towards release. In the dryland trials, it's been right up at the top on a 2-year average. We'll see how it is this year. It's kind of a lot like Whistler that we don't have in this trial, but about 2 pounds higher test weight relative to Whistler. Okay, so it's not been released, so we don't really need to talk about it too much. So the last one that we have here of the red wheats, I believe, is KS Western Star, and this is a hard red winter wheat from Kansas State University breeding program at Hays, Kansas, and this is marketed by the Kansas Wheat Alliance. So this was the first year that it's being entered into our trials, either the dryland or the irrigated trials. So we'll really get our first chance to see some data in the trials this year. It is a cross between a Kansas line and Bird. We're all very familiar with Bird, It carries the same gene for wheat curl mite resistance that bird does, but I think it's in a little bit better agronomic package for production under irrigation. So look at the characteristics table too. Really good protection against all three rusts and decent protection to the wheat curl mite, which then helps mitigate damage from the wheat streak mosaic virus. The hard white wheat part of the trial, and on my right here we have Sunshine, and on the left we have Breck. Sunshine was released quite a number of years ago. I think it was the first thing that we were able to release after Snowmass in 2009 that had similar characteristics, not quite to the same level as Snowmass, but Sunshine is still one of the hard white wheats which is eligible for a price premium through the CWRF Ardent Mills Ultra Grain Premium Program. Sunshine is a little bit older wheat, straw strength's not so great. It still seems to have pretty good yield potential. Quality characteristics are pretty good. It is pretty susceptible to wheat streak mosaic virus. The one that I'd like to maybe spend a little bit more time is on my left here, and this is Breck. And we released Breck from our program in 2017. And again, Breck is a hard white wheat derived from a cross with Antero and Denali. So it has some of the same features that we see from both Antero and Denali in terms of yield potential. It's got the straw strength though of Denali. So in terms of the white wheats, this is one of our better dryland adapted, irrigated adapted wheats, I guess since Thunder CL, that many producers will remember from a number of years ago. So Breck has had good resistance to stripe rust, very good stem rust resistance. Leaf rust is not as good. In terms of the wheat streak mosaic virus, it doesn't carry any of the specific genes that I mentioned, but it just seems to have an overall good degree of tolerance to the wheat streak mosaic virus infection. So quality characteristics are good, standability is good. Pre-harvest sprouting tolerance is something that's very important in the white wheats. There are red wheats that sprout too, but we really want to have good sprouting tolerance in the white wheats, and the sprouting tolerance in Breck is second to none. So the other thing that I was talking about with regards to Guardian was this grain protein deviation, this tendency to have a little bit higher protein at some particular yield level, and Breck is as good as Guardian in that it tends to be really good at making protein. So we're getting towards the end here. We have 3 more white wheats to look at, and the first one here on my right is Snowmass 2.0, and on my left is Monarch. So as many people will recognize, we've been working very hard on hard white wheats going back 15 years at CSU, and those efforts were accelerated a little bit more over the last number of years through our collaborations with Ardent Mills. Snowmass was released in 2009, and it had very, very unique quality profile that made it such that Ardent was willing to pay a premium, and we've been working really hard to try to replicate that, but get it into a package that's more agronomically and farmer friendly at this time. So Snowmass 2.0 is our I mean it is where in terms of the quality, this is as close as we've been able to get to Snowmass. The quality of Snowmass 2.0 is just about like Snowmass, very, very small, a little bit less in terms of the water absorption, but it also has something called low polyphenol oxidase, which is very important in whole grain flour applications, and this is an enzyme that causes whole grain flour products to darken, and Snowmass 2.0 has very low polyphenol oxidase. Stripe rust resistance has been good, stem rust resistance is good, standability or the straw strength is also much improved relative to Snowmass, probably more similar to the Breck or Denali. So this Snowmass 2.0 was released just 2 years ago in fall 2018, so there should be some certified seed available for more widespread planting this fall. The price premiums from Ardent Mills, as I understand it, they change from year to year, and it will be sometime in August perhaps when those are finalized and announced, so the producers know what they would be getting into in terms of a price premium. So Monarch was released the same time that Snowmass 2.0 was released. Again, a hard white wheat. It does not have the same quality characteristics that Snowmass 2.0 or Breck have, but it's pretty good. So, but it's not part of the CWF Ardent Mills premium program. So it's my understanding that Ardent Mills will accept delivery of this, but they're not going to pay a premium for it. So on the yield side, this is the one that has been the highest yielder in the trials these last few years. Westbred had a wheat called WB4303. These were running kind of neck and neck, and so Monarch has had an exceptional record under irrigation. Best straw strength that we've ever developed at CSU. Tillers real well, decent test weights, good rust resistance, good stem rust resistance, as well as good stripe rust. Okay, so then the last one that we have here, Roger will just turn the camera. This is a hard white wheat from the Kansas State University breeding program at Hayes, marketed by the Kansas Wheat Alliance. This is KS Silverado. So the breeding program at Hayes, Kansas is one of the other programs in the region that works on hard white wheat, and this is their newest release from this past year, along with KS Western Star. So KS Silverado is one that again has a decent combined resistance to all three rusts. It has some protection against the wheat curl mite and thus wheat streak mosaic virus. But this is really our first time to get a chance to look at this in our trials here in Colorado. So with that, that's all I have to look at the varieties. The rest of the private varieties start from here, and I would just like to mention when the results are made available, you'll see a number of other wheats that are in the trial. I'll just kind of maybe mention a couple of them. There's a couple of new coaxium wheats from our program, coaxium wheats from other programs. Crescent AX is in here, and so we'll have some basis for comparison of those. We also have 10 wheats in here that carry a solid stem characteristic to provide some protection, some resistance to the wheat stem sawfly. And I'm not going to talk about that much more other than that. You can look at one of the other videos where I talk about that. And so we don't really expect that wheat stem sawfly is like a production issue under irrigation, but we kind of put them in this trial, in the irrigated trial, so we can just learn more about them, see what their top end yield potential is, and then learn a little bit more about their straw strength characteristics. So with that, that's all I have about the varieties. Just very quickly, I'd just like to make a quick comment. Many people know that I'll be retiring at the end of this year. I'm actually going half-time on August 15th, and then I'll be fully retiring at the end of the year. CSU really did a great job in conducting a search through a global pandemic, conducting interviews online and such, and they identified a top-notch candidate, an individual by the name of Dr. Eston Mason, who for the last 10 years has been the wheat breeder at the University of Arkansas. So Eston has been working in wheat breeding for 15 odd years, if you can't count graduate school, and he's got a ton of experience, and I think he's going to bring a lot of new good ideas as well as new energy into the program. So with that, I'd just like to thank the Colorado wheat producers and the Colorado wheat industry for all their support over the years. We've done a lot of great things. I think you look at all the different varieties that we have in the trial here. My team and I are very proud of all that we've done. There are more challenges that remain, of course, but we could not have done what we've been able to do without the support of Colorado wheat, and we really appreciate all that support. So thank you very much.